It is an honor and privilege to have these two distinguished people with me today. We have Mandira Bhagwandin, who is lecturer at the Stellenbosch University, and we also have Davis Makori. He is Rotary Peace Fellow and Humanitarian Advisor. Welcome to both of you. So today we are here to discuss about a very important topic, which is from periphery to power, how Africa is rising in a multipolar world order. So I'll start with Mandira. Mandira, we are living in a very interesting time. In one side, you have so many conflicts are going on. We have conflicts in Sudan, we have conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, and there are. It is very difficult to navigate this time. But in the same time, we see that to some extent the world governance world order is led by the global south. We saw how Indonesia in last 4 years, Indonesia, then it followed by India, and then Brazil, and now South Africa, we led the G20 order. So my question, because you are from South Africa, you follow multilateralism very closely, I wanted to know, how do you see this recent G20? What is your evaluation on it, and what is the takeaway from this G20?
Thanks, Amir. Thank you for having us here. I think first I must say, as a South African, I feel very proud that my government and our presidency pulled off in my eyes, a very well organized, well put together G20, despite a few hiccups from some foreign partners. I think the key takeaway I think we can point to is that there was this renewed focus or renewed energy on multilateralism as a way to address global problems. We know that no one country can address climate change by themselves. We know no one country can address digital inequality by themselves. So we know there was this collective kind of voice that we have to work together, even though there are kind of actors or players that are, in a way, trying to downplay the effectiveness of multilateralism. It was a success for me in terms of South Africa, not only bringing its interests and holding the table and hosting it, but also bringing the rest of the continent, the rest of Africa with it to the table. I think one of the kind of challenges was that we struggled to get an affirmative declaration on the issue of global public goods, and that being that different countries interpret it in different ways. And so I think going forward, and as we hand over to the US, there's going to be, I think, a lot more kind of work on how we are going to kind of reach consensus. Yes. On addressing the issue of global public goods.
No, agreed. I agree. It's wonderful. Thank you for your introductory remarks, Mandira. I think one important point that Mandira highlighted is the collective voice. Now, I wanted to ask you, Davies, when and how do you think this collective voice will come when the countries itself, many African countries at this moment, we see they are struggling with their internal conflicts. So when the country's national interest comes first, when the countries they have to first resolve their internal domestic problem, how do you think that this collective voice will come?
Thank you again, Samira, and thank you for having us. And I really like that she went straight into the G20 and these dynamics. And turning to your question, especially about conflicts, since 1946, 1/3 of all intrastate and interstate armed conflicts have been in Africa. It is our most pressing developmental problem, and if we are to take center stage or if we are to move from the periphery into the center in global politics, this is an area we really have to cover as an African continent. We've been operating under different frameworks, which I think it's fair to say at this particular point in time may not have been as effective as they were designed to be. There are many reasons why. You can point at numerous design flaws, but the overall logic of the Africa Peace and Security Architecture, which is our framework for resolving conflicts, works on a principle of subsidiarity, where each of the regional economic communities is essentially a fast responder in their neighborhood to conflicts. And turning to these internal conflicts, I've recently been to Sudan, for example, and at the onset of this conference, it was mentioned that there's a mischaracterization of most of these conflicts as just civil war. But what they are in reality are these omnibus, all-in-one conflicts that has elements of civil war, but has too many external actors involved, too many conflicting regional interests, colonial legacy issues that are all intersecting, and making a conflict like Sudan evolve from being a contest of power into what is now the world's worst humanitarian crisis, by whichever parameter you choose to examine it, whether it's displacement, whether it's the effect on refugees, whether it's the devastation caused, whether it's the humanitarian cost. To answer your question now, what, and then the so what. Our structures have, in the case of Sudan, for example, it will be the Intergovernmental Authority on Developments as the first responder to act, to use all of the tools of peacemaking, peace building, mediation, to intervene in these conflicts. But the role of external actors often means that African conflicts end up on the table of these ad hoc formations. Yeah. In Sudan, it's the Quad. In South Sudan, it's the Troika. In Mozambique, it's a different foreign power. In the Sahel, it's different, and that really underscores the problem of a lack of unity of purpose, a lack of a design flaw that doesn't focus these instruments and mechanisms and arrangements on what the actual needs of the civilians being affected by the conflict are. And also a reality that we are essentially in a system that has replicated flaws that were never ours to begin with. Our borders are not of our own making. Most African nation states are a legacy of the scramble and petition for Africa. So even as we're trying to resolve these very complex internal conflicts with these multiple external actors, we're essentially trying to untangle systems that were never built with us in mind. So it makes it really, really hard for us to achieve solidarity when the structures on which you depend on and the role of external actors can supersede and essentially make almost impossible the task of achieving unity of purpose.
Sure. So I think a few key words that I can take. One is solidarity.
Yes.
Another is the role of external actors.
Yes.
I think I'll come to Mandira. Next question is that I want to know how much, when we say that Africa is coming to the center, one important factor we are counting is that the way foreign leaders have started quoting African leaders. We always had this, we all know about China-Africa Summit, Japan-Africa Summit, India-Africa Summit. In last 2-3 years, we saw Korea-Africa Summit, Saudi Arabia-Africa Summit. So all these summits, what is going on? In one side, I can say that it is Africa's importance. But on another side, some people are also saying it's a scramble for Africa. It's a new scramble. It's nothing. So what do you think has changed? What is, do you consider this as Africa's rise?
I think Africa's rise is one of the ways to put it, provided that we leverage the opportunities strategically, provided that we're asserting and organizing ourselves to really maximize partnerships, both at a continental, regional, and national level. And on the issue of it being, all this interest of foreign actors, as you mentioned, we have a kind of an array of Africa +1 summits from both traditional or more kind of colonial legacy partners, as well as emerging countries. And we are, if you look at it, often considered the last frontier of development. There is immense opportunity on the continent. We're talking, the buzzword now is critical minerals, right? But then the other buzzword is our demography. We are going to be the youngest population by 2050. Then we have the AFCFTA. We will be the largest, once it's actualized and realized, and once we get all the mechanics of it into place, we will be the largest free market in the world. So there is this scramble. There is this renewed interest, I'd say, on the continent, because there's a realization that maybe not in the next 10 years, but maybe in the next 50 years, we will be a destination that has a lot to offer. So scramble, I don't like the word because, as you know, the connotations of it, but you can say this is the kind of new scramble for Africa. Yeah.
No, I'd not use the word scramble, of course, because this is also a colonial word. We want to decolonize, and we are using the scramble.
Absolutely.
But then the point still remains that there is a dependence of external actors, and if Africa wants to come to the center, it can't stay dependent. So Davis, you spoke about the conflict issues, how this is playing out in different parts of the continent. So my question is, you see, still even almost 50 years for all African countries got independence, the African countries are still dependent on external powers to provide them security.
Yes.
There is this in the southern Africa, you have SADC, you have ECOWAS, you have IGAD. In fact, you have African Union. Why these regional organizations are failing to provide the security? Why? I think this is one reason why these external actors are getting the entry. So what is wrong with this regional organization, and how these organizations can be strengthened to play a major role?
Thank you. That's actually a really big question. And every conflict in bikes, I can say this uniquely, every conflict is almost unique. The root causes are unique. The solutions to every conflict are almost unique. And the approach that has to be used to approach, for example, the conflict in Sudan, the conflicts in the Sahel, the conflicts in Mozambique are all unique by their own nature. The question as to why these regional instruments are not effective in resolving these conflicts. As a peace and conflict researcher, I can say fast that they don't have enforcement mechanisms. So if we look across the world and we look at peace and security arrangements that have worked, they actually have teeth. And we have success examples in Africa, especially the Economic Community of West Africa States, or ECOWAS, where the ECOMOG, or the military arm of ECOWAS, has actually been able to back up its you can say threats to conflict actors to comply, and if not, ECOWAS will intervene. Not advocating for the for interventionist approaches to resolving armed conflicts in Africa, but it actually shows that when you do not have an enforcement mechanism, when you don't have the teeth, and you do not have the capacity to actually go in and bring parties to the table and exert your leverage, which needs the solidarity, as we mentioned, and also to pull back into the wider picture, the global peace and security architecture. These don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in a world where the United Nations Security Council is the supreme peace and security governance body of the world, controlled by veto powers, controlled by 5 countries that have a deterministic influence on events or conflicts anywhere in the world. If one member state can overrule a resolution in any part of the world by any other state. And I think we operate in that system where, one, we need more community-focused, more civilian-focused protection mechanisms. We need enforcement for these structures to work. But these structures do not exist in a vacuum. They need a just and equitable world order where they can actually make independent decisions or autonomous decisions.
I get it. And good that you mentioned UNSC. No, I mean, if we start talking about UNSC, I think we'll go on for hours and hours.
Go on.
But then one important topic is also, which came out, is the participation in the big table. So one important thing that happened 2 years ago, it was under India's presidency when African Union got the seat in the G20 permanent membership. So Mandira, do you think, of course it's a very good step, it's a first step, a baby step I would say, but do you think since 2023 anything changed? Do you think Africa got a bigger voice? And if not, what should African Union do?
Thank you, Samira. Yeah, again, a very broad question. So I think that it's good that we have a seat at the table. I think we have to, the African Union, to my knowledge, especially around its kind of public diplomacy around having a seat at the G20, very little has been, there's been a very little traction around it leveraging the G20. And also using the G20 as a kind of I'd say a channel to amplify Africa's voice. I do think that we've shown that when the AU works with another country, or it can partner with an African country, it can have a bigger voice at the G20 table. And I know that the South African delegation and the South African government have worked closely with the AU to ensure there is some alignment of interests at this G20. My kind of take on it is that behind the scenes, the AU needs to focus on organizing itself, organizing its members, organizing not just at the G20, but if we look at the UN, the Africa group, there needs to be this strong network between the AU and the AU representatives and delegations at various multilateral platforms. So I think it's a good start. I would like to see it leveraged a lot better.
I think it's a very good suggestion. You should talk to the African Union and give this suggestion, because this thing, I think it can work. But Davis, my question to you, I'll get back to the last question. I think I still have one small follow-up question.
Sure.
Is that when I said that regional organizations were not working, African regional organizations, you spoke about UN, but I want to know a little more on enforcement problem that you cited.
Yes.
Is it because the national interest of each country's sovereignty issues which is creating the hurdle, or is it because the external influence on these regional bodies? What is it preventing these organizations to get the teeth, as you said?
Yeah, good question. The answer is actually both. A lot of interstate conflicts, again, do not take place in a vacuum, and peace and security challenges in one region are not often localized. If you have a conflict, for example, as we do in Sudan, between two armed parties, the effect is regional. So the approach to resolving these conflicts has to be regional. It can't just be one country, or you can't sequester peace and security problems. It comes with migration, refugee flows, with humanitarian action, with contests for natural resources. That means by extension that you need your neighbors at the table. You need your regional mechanisms at the table to help solve these conflicts. You can't just draw a border around this fighting. So that's where these structures come into place. But unfortunately, in the design of a lot of our institutions, they are not given binding powers or teeth to actually act in the interests of civilian protection. What do I mean? Every sovereign country has an army or a government that essentially has monopoly of coercive force over the population. But can we really say the same about our regional economic communities? Does IGAD have authoritative force to make these decisions on behalf, for example, of civilian protection or the interests of peace, to intervene in member states' country affairs? Have the countries invested in the capacity of these different regional economic mechanisms or security arrangements to actually make authoritative and binding decisions and to compel these parties? And when you come back to external actors, do the armed parties in conflicts have other interests or backers that they can go to? Where do they get their weapons? Where do they get their diplomatic support? Some African member states have actually also at the United Nations Security Council approached different veto-carrying members to block resolutions. So you can see we're existing in this very, very complex dynamic where it's both internal and external, and where if you need that binding power, if you need the teeth to enforce peace and conflict resolution, you need, as I like the word you use, you need some solidarity or unity of purpose within these frameworks. And they also need to have the power to actually make and enforce these decisions.
I understand. It's like it is more nuanced, and
Yes,
you can't
incredibly
just. The
nuanced.
problem has
Yeah.
lot of levels.
Layers.
Yes.
So solution should also be found with lot of levels.
Yes.
But I don't know how much time we have. But I would want to ask you one final question to both of you.
Yes.
Mandira, you said about that the demography you mentioned, and Africa it's the most youthful continent in the world. So now, if Africa wants to come to the center, and what we would all want it to be, how do you see the youth's role in it? How do you think the policies should be youth inclusive? What should we do?
Yeah, no, I think the African youth especially has a big role to play. I think there's generally a sense of frustration with kind of leaderships or regimes that have been in power for way too long, and there is this kind of restlessness, and there's this kind of frustration that you'd kind of seen with Nepal, and it's bubbling, and if they're not taken seriously, there will be ramifications. And the youth are, I think this youth is one of the most connected, most technologically savvy. I mean, if you look at the startup scene in Nairobi, in Kenya, there's ingenuity, there's innovation, and they just need to be channeled, they need to be capacitated, and they will, they'll shape the continent in a very innovative, forward-looking trajectory if they're given the chance.
It's very definitely youths will have a say, but then it's very unfortunate also that they have to come to the street to get the voice.
Yes.
It's you mentioned Nepal, but it is happening in Kenya. It is happening in Nigeria, in Madagascar. So this is an unfortunate part. But then, according to you, Davis, how do you think youth can bring African continent in the center? What role youth should play? Can there be? But there are good examples also. For example, in Senegal, they have a very young president. And some countries, it's not like everything is not bad. So how do you? I want to end it in a positive note that that Africa is going to be a center. I'm a Afro-optimist, as we say.
Yeah.
So tell our audience some good word about how do you see. Give us a roadmap how Africa will be the center.
I love Afro-optimism. I'm also an Afro-optimist. And I'll pick off where Mandipa left. Think of what's happening across the continent, in Kenya, in Tanzania, Gen Z protests, and even further abroad in Nepal. And think of the times we're living in, and think of these transitions, and think of these changing demographics. We're finally starting to see people who had been excluded from our politics, from our governance, now come to the center. The internet, social media networks, the kind of transparency that is now available to the youth to actually audit, that's a word I like to use, to audit their governments, to ask the hard questions. Why are these?
Very important tool.
Yes. Why are these decisions being made? Why are we being left from the decision-making table? Why aren't we observing term limits? The challenges to corruption, or even in countries such as Kenya, youth actually starting to hold their leaders accountable and asking, why do we have this much debt? And where is it being spent? So within that challenge, there will obviously be the tension and the contest that spills onto the streets, and we will unfortunately see violence. But what's happening in this process is that new generations are coming to the conversation in ways that they were previously not allowed to participate. They are auditing systems. And most of the governments that will now have to rewrite their social contract with their youth, they know they are under scrutiny. We can only get better if our politics is more inclusive, more transparent, more honest, and that they feel they have to be more accountable to the youth, because now everything is in the open. People can demand information. People can agitate for change. People can demand for transparency and accountability in how their money is made. And our leaders are now facing, James Farron's audience costs. So anything you say right now, the youth are watching. They are keeping us on toes. My optimism lies in the hope that this increased engagement by the youth will actually turn around our institutions to be a little more accountable, to be a little more responsive, and to be a bit more transparent.
Wonderful. Hope and renewed hope. Yes. The world lives on hope. So we also hope that the continent will not just be in the center in paper, but it will be actually center of power. I thank you, both of you.
Thank you so
It
much.
was a wonderful discussion, and I'm very happy to be with you too. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.